Good morning, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's actually a fine day outside. You should be playing golf, you should be in your club or relaxing with some magazines at home. So, thank you very much for taking the time to be here today and take part in the discussions. Of course, there is a very eminent panel here to discuss the topic, as Sandhya pointed out. But I would treat all of you as part of the discussion group because the theme is interesting and it's getting more and more interesting as we go along. The whole thing started with the book, the Endeavours in Self-Reliance, a book published by DRDO and for which I was the principal editor. And this was published actually in 2022. And I recently presented a copy of it to the BIC library. And the BIC director, young Vikram Bhatt, had a look at it and browsed through it and said, this looks like a very interesting book around which you should have a discussion on the subject. That is how it turned out. So firstly, I need to thank BIC for taking that initiative. I must thank the panelists in particular because each one of them acceded to my request rather readily. It not only shows that they are still friendly with me, but it also shows their keenness to discuss and make their views heard and felt on the subject of self-reliance. Dr. Samir Kamath has traveled all the way from Delhi. Dr. Christopher, he keeps traveling all the way. He is shuttling between Chennai and Bangalore as a matter of course, and then travels to other places, continues to be very active. Marshal Rajkumar has many activities, but he does, in his heart, he is a flyer, but a test pilot. And what is more interesting is he actually founded the culture of very objective test flying for our LCA Tejas aircraft. Thank you very much. And Dr. Ananthakrishnan. I had known Anant for a long time as a young journalist. Now he's a very mature journalist, and he shuttles between Thiruvananthapuram and here. So thank you to all the panelists. Now the topic today is endeavors in self-reliance, especially with reference to the defense research. At the outset, I have to say something here. The defense research is not a preserve of DRDO. Defense research is much wider than that. It's true, the DRDO played a very important role in this, but it's getting much bigger than that. We are going to discuss actually the contents of a book which is about DRDO. There are defense production units, other defense research entities in the private sector, even in the academia. The book does touch upon some of those things, but not in great detail. As probably all of you know, the DRDO has a very big spread over the country. I deliberately removed all the alphabet soup, DMRL, DTRL, NSTL, NPOL. You will get confused. But you can look at the locations. So we are very widely spread over the country, in the deserts, in the islands, in the high altitude areas, and of course, Bangalore, Hyderabad, and has a magnificent DRDO Bhavan, DRDO headquarters, which is Dr. Kamath's office. The entire management functions are carried out from there. Now, this is the unit we are going to talk about. But as I mentioned, the defense technology environment is much bigger than what the DRDO is. I want to point out to you the defense public sector undertakings. Like right in Bangalore, we have several. Bharat Electronics, and I see Captain Prabhala, who was the chairman of BEL here. Thank you. Many ordnance factories now corporatized, test ranges, quality assurance, and certification agencies. There are also some private industries who have been associated largely as subsystem and component manufacturers for this R&D effort. But there have been some exceptions, and these exceptions are increasing now. And there is a new environment now with the Make in India and Defense Procurement Procedure. It's called the DPP. I'm amused to see that this is the DPP 2016. Why I'm amused is I was part of the drafting team for the DPP 202. So it has been evolving. I think the defense procurement procedure has been evolving. And I'm very glad to see that there is a new category called by Indian design, indigenous design, developed and manufactured. And the document says that that will have a very high priority. So all that is to the good. And there have been several policy initiatives taken by the government enabling the MSMEs to make a contribution to the defense technology effort. Now we come to the history part of it. Why should we write a history at all? As you all know, the history is termed as itihasa in Sanskrit, which clearly means thus it happened. Why I'm emphasizing this is the history is not what it ought to have been or what we wish it was. It was what it was. Plain and simple facts, successes, failures, and things of that nature. And therefore, when I got an invitation, actually from Dr. Christopher, in sometime in 2016 or so, when he was the chairman, to take up this task of writing the history of DRDO, I hesitated a bit for the first time because although I had retired some time back in 2002, that was 15 years before, I still thought I was still an insider, and maybe an insider cannot bring the sufficient objectivity to writing a history. So I consulted a few friends, including a guru, and he said, KG, if it was good for Valmiki and Vyasa, it's good for you. Because Valmiki and Vyasa, they also participated in the history they wrote. So it's fine. So that was some kind of a... So I agreed, okay, we'll take up this thing. I went up with some thoughts, some presentations like this to Dr. Christopher's office, and he called in his chiefs, probably it included Samir, and we had a discussion on how the history should be shaped. I had some views, and we all discussed this, and eventually we zeroed in on some guidelines. We said the objective of this history book is to let people know more and understand DRDO better. Not that it has been a screened affair, but it has always been scattered. So can we put these things together and let people know more for more transparency, more logical, more factual? And secondly, of course, there's always this learnings from the past, which incidentally is the Greek origin of the word history. The word history in Greek actually means learning from the past. But one thing was commonly agreed, that we are not going to churn out a coffee table glossy volume extolling all the virtues of DRDO. Nor are we going to be an auditor's report focused only on the lapses and shortfalls and so on. We need to be very balanced. Should include the activities of the labs, headquarters, as well as eminent individuals who have been very important players in the game. retired people who have been in DRDO before or people who have been associated with DRDO. That was a very interesting aspect of this book. I don't think you will find many formal publications of the government which synthesizes the official accounts of the laboratories with the personalized accounts of the people. There's a beautiful account in the atomic energy. There's a beautiful account but they're all personalized accounts of Mr. C.V. Sundaram or Mr. R. Mudan and so on. But this actually tried to combine it. How much it has been successful, that is for you to decide. And another thing which was decided at that meeting is, let us not pay too much attention to editing to get into a very standard manner of speaking. Let the lab speak in their own language. Let the people speak in their own language, barring a few very important issues. Let it be. Let the speakers come through. That has been my effort. And so we got out a book, which is here, 442 pages or something, and pretty heavy. But I was guided in this, bringing out this book, by an earlier volume which had been published by DRDO, by another guru of mine, Dr. Ramdas Shenoy, who was a very, very well-known radar specialist, director of the Electronics and Radar Development Establishment for a long time. He, with the association of two other senior colleagues, Mr. Venkateshan was associated with the Pokhran 1, and Mr. Nagaratnam, who is a radiation specialist and so on. Eventually, this book was published under the editorship of Dr. Shenoy. The sizes are exactly to scale. You know, that is a nice, cute little book which you could carry in your hand. And because it covered the time, 1958 to 1982. But it tells you a very nice story, starting from the World War II India and the defense technologies available, the very start of the Defense Science Organization under Professor D.S. Kothari, Professor Bhagwantam, and various other people. And tells you, without mincing words, all the challenges that the DRDO met with and what succeeded, what did not succeed. It even talks about the internal problems of DRDO, how to synthesize the efforts of the civilian scientists and the armed force officers who were working within the organization. In fact, the leadership at those days is almost entirely from with the armed forces officers, whereas the scientists had a strength in their own domains. So this had to be harmoniously blended. That's a very nice book, and it's still available, and you could read it, and that's very interesting. So we decided to adopt roughly the same process, be very transparent, be very balanced, and like a famous English king supposed to have said, he wanted his portrait painted, warts and all. He didn't want anything hidden. We didn't. I think if you read this book, you would see quite an amount of successes, and we will also see stories of what did not succeed or what is yet to succeed, or missed opportunities, or in some cases, plain failures. We just couldn't hack it. And we have tried to say that. But when I wrote all this, you can imagine the scientists have their own sentiments. They do think that they need to be very honest. At the same time, they don't think that they want to be brutally honest. For instance, nobody does. If you want to say that nobody wants to say that, no. But especially some very tragic events. Like, for instance, we lost an aircraft in the development of the airborne early warning system, which killed 4 Air Force personnel and 4 DRDO personnel. A very tragic event for many of us. Dr. Christopher is here. Now, to write about it again and so on is a painful experience. So I had to spend some time with Dr. Ramchan those days to persuade him that that's okay. History will forgive you, but history will approve it. And I have to tell you that my inspiration for taking such an approach really came from the Navy's history. Indian Navy has brought out, I think it's 3 volumes of history of Indian Navy. I browsed through it. I was thoroughly impressed. It was edited by, you probably know, Admiral Hiranandani, Vice Admiral Hiranandani. And it is a beautiful account of how the Indian Navy started and how they went on from strength to strength, including some spectacular failures, like they lost the INS Kukri to a Pak submarine. It talks about that in fairly frank detail. I thought that would be the right approach, and that is what has been taken. Now we sort of delve into the subject proper. What does this book contain? It has a opening chapter, as it should, as to what does technology do to war. It seems to be an obvious question now. It was not so obvious for a long time, although we have a historical record of Archimedes is supposed to have helped his city kingdom, to conquer the invading ships by lining up a whole lot of very complex concave mirrors and focus the sun's rays on the incoming sails of the ships and burnt them and so on. And recently MIT conducted a little bit of research to find out if this could actually be done. So that is probably one of the earliest known defense R&D for venture, but that was many thousands of years back. But it is very clear from all the recent events that the future is going to be very, very highly impacted by what we call today high technology, precision-guided missiles, uninhabited platforms, which is another way of saying unmanned aerial platforms. This includes ground vehicles, sea vehicles, electronic warfare, multi-sensor fusion, network-centric warfare, space-based platforms, direct energy weapons, even non-lethal weapons, and so on. And there are many things are already there, and many more are opening up. So technology does seem to play a very important part. And not merely the systems, but there are a lot of underpinning technologies which go with these systems, which are definitely very high performance materials, functional materials. That is, you can actually engineer the molecules to perform the functions that you want them to perform. Semiconductors, right at the high end, gallium nitride, gallium arsenide, much beyond silicon. Artificial intelligence, I don't need to talk about it. Modeling and simulation, this is a hidden hero. Chupa Rustam. This modeling and simulation is there everywhere. People do not realize it, and you cannot do without it. But the capabilities in modeling and simulation, these are some of the high technologies which are coming up. But I also want to ask a question: can technology lose wars? Now that seems like an absurd question. It was kind of answered in a science fiction story you might have heard of Arthur C. Clarke, a man who wrote many very famous science fiction stories. He wrote a short story sometime in 1958 called Superiority. And that deals with an intergalactic warfare. 2 galaxies are fighting it out. And eventually it is the galaxy which had the higher technology which loses the war. And the story is based on what they do to the scientific advisor of that losing galaxy. So some lesson. The book is, this short story is there in the Playboy Annual of 1964. So that's just a slight caution. So, but we're talking about self-reliance, which is really a topic today. Now, this is again, seems to be an obvious one. Taken at face value, everyone says that yes, we should be self-reliant. But when you go into the details, the concepts vary very, very widely. I've even heard very astonishing statement by somebody very high up in the Indian defense hierarchy who's actually quoted, who's on record as saying this self-reliance in defense technology is a self-inflicted pain. We should be able to buy the best things that we want and so on. That did sound like a brutal but somewhat illogical. But there are other versions of that which sounds much more logical. And that is, when the balloon goes up, as everyone says, when the war comes up, there is no second prize in the war. There is no consolation prize to the side which used indigenous weapons. And therefore, you must equip yourself with the best weapons wherever it is from. That sounds all very logical too. But the trick is in determining the optimal levels there. So can we go all one way? Can we go all other way? And so on. That is actually the main problem. Here I would like to say patriotism is a good thing, but I think we should look a little bit beyond patriotism. I've come across a very interesting saying, something it's very interesting to see flags do not flutter in vacuum. You need a medium. You need something. So what I would say, the real goals of real motivation for being self-reliant should really be reduce costs of acquisition, direct cost, life cycle costs. All of you, I'm sure, know the implications of all this. I'm really giving it in a capsule form. Software-intensive systems, can you really eliminate or at least minimize security compromises without self-reliance? Can you be dependability of supply and maintenance? It was reported sometime back when the war in Europe started that we have some of our naval projects stuck because there is a big naval project for which the main system is to come from Russia. The engine is coming from Ukraine. So we are stuck. So, and with all the dependence on Israel and the kind of war in the Middle East, what is the alternate routes? Everyone is aware that through the early 90s, when the Soviet system collapsed, the biggest crisis, and we were all aware of it, with the Indian armed forces faced at that time is, where is the supplies coming now? And so on. People have coped, system has coped with it, but that is a big location. That's an important issue. The next is, can you use the investments in defense technology to stimulate industrial activities and economic growth? Now, this is a very, very important aspect, especially to a country which is struggling to meet other needs. We are unable to meet the full needs of healthcare. We are unable to meet the needs of habitat, infrastructure, and so on. So if you can stimulate industrial activity and economic growth, you probably go much farther. And of course, dual-use technologies, you are aware of it. And the impact on academic research. And last but not the least, this is something which many of us who worked in the DRDO or even in the defense production would vouch for. If you do not have a defense technology capability in the country, in depth, in reasonable depth. You cannot buy a defense technology system smartly. Even to be a smart buyer, you need to be somewhere there. If you had, I can quote many instances from the world, including many very rich countries in Middle East, who apparently do not have a defense R&D system, but they are very, very big buyers of defense technology systems. Now, I think Allah is saving them. And I think we cannot be in that kind of a capability. So, just to quickly run through, so all this impetus really started in 1970. In early 70s, I think after the war and all that, around 72 or 73, the government made a formal statement in the parliament saying that we are now shifting gears in defense research and we want to emphasize more on big equipment, because till then the emphasis of the defense technology work was on components and small things and so on. So a series of projects were undertaken at the time. I want to point out that is when really the very, very fruitful decades of collaboration between LRDE and Bharat Electronics started. They came up with some radar systems and communication systems and so on. Some of you may be surprised to hear this so-called computer-controlled nodal switch for grid communication under what is called a RN plan. RN stands for Army Radio Engineered Network and so on. But this actually predates the digital communication in the country by at least about a decade. It is digital communication, a segmented digital communication for the Indian Army. It was DRDO which introduced it there. And of course, the famous Orpheus 703 jet engine for the HF-24. You know the story. The HF-24 was an underpowered engine, and there was a reheat version to be developed. It was a DRDO push project, which was done along with HAL and Air Force. It came up to some stage. But the HF-24 went out of service. And many more during the 70s and 80s, including the indigenization by reverse engineering of a surface-to-air missile, which is of Russian origin, and what is called the GTX engine technology. This is when actually that is not an engine, it is to study the process of building an engine. And so it has been fairly well advanced. And but I would like to point out the financial allocations to DRDO started rising slowly from something like 1.3% of the defense budget in 69-70 to some 2% in 73 to 4% in 1989. Now that for that kind of commitment seemed like a pretty good start. But there came a boom phase. There is a boom phase which would roughly put it between 1980 to 2000, those 2 decades. We seeded mega projects. Suddenly the DRDO decided that we would actually work on major systems. So the MBT Arjun, which is already there, and it was re-strategized. Then the famous Integrated Guided Missile Development Program, one of the Bhishma Pitamahas of the IGMDP, is here with us, Lieutenant General Sundaram. Light combat aircraft development, I think we have Commodore Balaji, who took over the task from Dr. Kota. Aerial early warning systems, all this came up in one go within a period of something like, they came up means that the projects came up. Now, what it means is that somehow DRDO, under the leadership of some very, very interesting personalities, Dr. Arunachalam and following him, Dr. Abdul Kalam, they managed to convince the government that we can do such big things. We don't have to be confined to small little boxes. That needed competence. It also needed guts and a lot of luck. And but they managed to convince them. But I would give a lot of credit to the political support. If you look at this period, 1982 to 2000, there had been 7 prime ministers, some 12 or 14 defense ministers, and so on. But all of them had consistently supported the activities as these mega projects which are going on. It is these mega projects, through the years, which has fructified, and again under a very inspiring leadership of Dr. Atre, Mr. Natarajan, Dr. Saraswat, Dr. Avinash Chandar, Dr. Christopher, Dr. Satish Reddy, built the sinews of strength. When I say sinews, I actually mean sinews. The muscle force to build these big projects, all this was built over very painstaking effort during these years for missiles, aeronautics, armament systems, and so on. Many things. But I would like to draw your personal attention to the last couple of lines, last but one. Life sciences. Life sciences was very important. Army, Navy, Air Force, ultimately, as of now, finally, we have war fighters, and the war fighters' needs have to be met, and they're very diverse. And there's no reason why it cannot be done in the civil sector, but it was not being done. So somebody had to do it. So for many years, and please remember, they do much more than that. They prepare space quality food. Rakesh Sharma has taken it, Subhanshu Shukla has taken it. That is the Defense Food Research Laboratory's output. DMRL, Defense Metallurgical Research Laboratory, which is Dr. Kamat's parent laboratory, has provided new material compositions ranging from anti-armor, armor anti-ballistic, to naval steels. Now, the naval steels is a very interesting thing. The Navy, all the warships were built of steel, but of some very special grade. Strengths, durability, water resistance, and lots of qualities are needed. Enormous import. They're all huge, 10,000 tons, 20,000 tons of material. The DMRL, in collaboration with others, took up projects to make sure that these steels will not be imported. And I think, am I right, Commodore? Everything, including the aircraft carriers, they're all built with steels for which the development work has been done by DRDO. So we're going there. So I want to say, so therefore, what has come out of it? I've used the word fruiting. There's a lot of fruiting. Fruits have come out. This phase of, making investments in DRDO and having trust in DRDO to deliver the goods. I don't think the country has been failed in that. We have, I don't want to go through the whole thing. We are right from long range, over 5,000 kilometers. Nobody wants to say how much more than 5,000. Fine. So right to very short anti-tank missiles, which goes to 2 kilometers. BrahMos, I believe it's all combat proven. Akash is combat proven. Many more to come. I'm not going to give you a list, just giving you a taste. Similarly, in aeronautics, the crown jewel is the LCA Tejas fighter, and others are in offing. The Netra airborne early warning and control system, Lakshya, and so on. And underwater sensors, naval seals we talked about. Arjun is a very interesting project. I had an interesting chat with Mr. Natarajan, who was a life and soul of the project for many years. He tells me that in his after he was 50, the next 2 years, he has spent 150 days in the Rajasthan desert, proving the tank, in all kinds of trials. It is a very hard work, believe me. I mean, those of you who are not familiar with this kind of field trials and things of that nature, very, very hard work. And many things have been done. This ATGS, the Advanced Artillery Gun System, this is a collaboration with an industry, private industry. That's right? Yeah. And that's a very successful project. What I want to talk to you is, this is just a sampling of very big systems. But please understand, all this has been done in just one generation. Why I'm saying one generation is, I can throw my mind back because I was in DRDO from 1965 onwards. So I know the mahal. I knew what there was at that time. At the end of the Pakistan war in 71, Indian Armed Forces, of course, they won the war, but there is very little technology to speak of. Actually, the gauntlet was picked up something at that time. It was very good that the government did not rest on the laurels of the victory. They said this is the time to start building, and it resulted in major investments in the 80s. And resulted, so you really are talking about the output that started coming in 2005, 2010. So it is just really the career of one soldier, career of one scientist, career of one IAS officer. We see such a transformation. It is not India which existed in 1975. I hope we realize that, and and a lot of it credit must go to DRDO, not by alone. DRDO working with partners in the defense production unit, ordnance factories, and very often some administrators have played a very, very key role. I would like to give, from some personal exposure, I would like to give a very high credit to at least two defense ministers in the process. One was Mr. Arun Singh, who was a defense minister of sorts for some time in the mid 80s, and Mr. Venkatraman. I mean, what they have done to make this mega push is something very invaluable. But the thing is that all this is available, done in one generation. But that's all okay. But did we make an impact? How do you measure the impact made by DRDO? Well, I think I'm sorry, I'm slightly running off, but I will catch up. You need to measure the impact made by some parameters. What are those parameters? Obviously, it will be the economics first. What is the return on investments? In fact, DRDO did a study with the National Council of Applied Economic Research. That was the results were of 2007. Now, it gave a very favorable report, but now I'm sure that this is very much better. What are the production values achieved by the design effort made by DRDO, and what resource allocations have been made to DRDO? What industrial capabilities have grown because of the stimulus from the DRDO projects? How human capital has been built in the academia and various research institutions, various MTech courses. The kind of MTech courses which have been seeded in various IITs and various colleges. National collaborations at a very big level. Technology to people. Now, this is an interesting topic. Here I'm talking about, if you go to any of the DRDO laboratories within far-flung areas, there is one in Almora. Is it still in Almora or Pithoragarh? It is in Pithoragarh. There's one in Leh. There's one in Tejpur. One in Kulu. Now you go on there, they're doing some very good scientific work on avalanche prediction or some high altitude agriculture and so on. But much more important is what those little scientific bubbles are doing to the community at large there. It's impossible to imagine sitting from here. But I would say it is economics and economics again. It is first and last, it is economics. I will come to the economic sense again. But therefore, does everyone accept that the DRDO is alive and kicking? No. There are many people who have other views, as it should be. It's a free country, it's a very vibrant society, and people have views, and there are a lot of very knowledgeable people in the public domain, and they do ask questions. Or some of the most relevant questions they ask is, if you're doing so well, why India continue to be a top importer of arms? Why? Good question. This volume, in its limited way, tries to provide some answers. Why are there time and cost overruns in so many programs, which is being even commented upon by public accounts committees and parliament? Why are there such heavy dependence for imported components, engines, electronics? Why is not more participation of private sector industry? Should not DRDO focus more on research and new concepts? Why are you reinventing the wheel? This reinventing the wheel is a very interesting question. I have struggled with it during my career in DRDO to provide some answers, because I've been asked this question even in a couple of times I had to appear before the Public Accounts Committee. We are in a funny situation. You are damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you say, no, we are not reinventing the wheel, we are using all components or systems already available elsewhere, we are making the system, then he turns around and says, then what is indigenous about it? So you are lost both ways. So there is the thing is, it's a genuine challenge, not only to us, to many other countries. If you go to Sweden, Swedish research and development is struggling with the same problem, with how to get the American engines and how to get the French armor and so on. So, but all this need to be answered. But we do have these criticisms come from a very vibrant society and a vibrant media, and therefore they need to be answered. And I'm sure DRDO, under the leadership of very enlightened people, do provide answers to it. But I suspect the answer is not to set up a review committee. We have a tendency to set up review committees when anything goes wrong. Usually we don't. We don't set up a review committee when we succeed. Have you heard of a review committee for the Indo-Pak War of 71? I haven't heard of it. But there are many lessons to be learned even from that. But so this habit of setting up a review committee has to be thought through, has to be modulated. But more important than that is there are many opinions which are in the public space, which I submit do not really merit consideration. The reason is they are views of those who stand to lose heavily when indigenous development succeeds. You can do your maths in your head. If there are 2,000 tanks to be imported, and each one costing maybe about 5,000 crores, you're talking about big money. So if that is made indigenously, somebody is losing. So and therefore, how much is he willing to invest in India for promoting his product? So that is a very simple thing. And those lobbies. And there is another thing which I like to call the least effort media. In physics, we have a fundamental principle of Fermat, which is the least action. That is how little you can work to get more column space. With very little work, you can do Google search, cut and paste, and come up with a very knowledgeable article. This is deadly. And there are echo box effects of that. I would also be wary about this wide spectrum think tanks. I'm all for think tanks. A lot of people want to be brand corporation. Welcome. But I think there are think tanks which claim to know practically every subject, and they produce a report on that, and that gets picked up, and not to mention cocktail party. I think I'm wrong in this graphics here as to where it should go. It should not be green because this will be recycled. It should be thrown out. So I come back to the finances because that is the beginning and end of all this self-reliance. In my opinion, flag waving and all that is fine. At the end of the day, you must justify yourself. We can go into the details of it. The DRDO headquarters has kindly updated the figures for me of last month. Cutting out the details, over the last about 7 or 8 years, the total production value achieved from DRDO projects is 5.5 trillion rupees. 5.5 trillion, which is 10 to the power of 12, right? So 5,56,113 crores. Now, do we have a measure of what this means? I can tell you, I think the 36 Rafale aircraft, which are directly imported, I'm not very sure, should check up the number, it's about 2 lakh crores. The defense budget for the year is maybe 6 lakh crores, something of that nature. So you are actually talking about a very significant chunk of indigenous production already created, and the graph is absolutely climbing steadily. You can take my word for it or you can look it up. I looked up the last defense budget. It is official because it says Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The Defense Ministry put out on this says there is enhanced allocation for DRDO. I was very, very happy. But after reading through it, I went back and put a question mark there. The reason is it says it is DRDO this year, that is in 25-26, is getting 12% more than what they got in 24-25. That is good news. But it also makes some statements. It says a lot of it will actually go to what is called hand-holding of private parties through development come production partner. It says it will also use it to provide adequate resources in deep technology. Honestly, with due apologies to, I don't know whether DRDO had a hand in drafting this, but I couldn't resist my laughter. Deep technology in this kind of money, you can look through the definitions of deep technology. We must be joking. And what is more important is some contradictions, like it says R&D project is special focus on fundamental research and hand-holding of production parties. These two are two different worlds. As far as I know, I have had a fairly long career. People who do fundamental research is one type, not just Chappal and Jolia. They are one type, they think differently. People who do technology transfer and handhold the industry is another type. Maybe DRDO will have two verticals, I'm not sure, but somehow it will happen. But what I was really bothered about in all that, which I thought should draw your attention to in a special graph. This is the percentage of DRDO's budget allocation as a percentage of defense budget. I have taken the last 16 years. What is very, very worrying, normally there is a kinkish. I mean, it won't be every year, it will not be. There are many issues out there. But you can see an absolutely steady, determined decline. Now, the reasons for it is probably good meat for the discussions with the panel. We have the eminent panelists here. Now, I couldn't believe that. And that 12% increase over last year is here. Yeah. So this is what comes in the PIB handout. Press Information Bureau says DRDO has a higher allocation. But the fact of the matter is, you actually have lower allocation. The figure which you have achieved in terms of percentage is comparable to what we had in 1985-86. Clock back. So that's something which we need to think about. If I'm wrong, well, we should be corrected. But I am hopeful because I have seen from experience in DRDO that the indomitable spirit which the DRDO has will overcome much as this quote says. I must thank Mr. Vikram, Director BIC, for giving me this opportunity. I must thank all of you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. We had a very interesting exposition on the demonstrated performance of DRDO over the last 35 years or so. And now we're going to kick off the discussion with a very eminent panel here, the four gentlemen who are sitting along with me. So I will kick off the discussion with a question to Dr. Christopher. Dr. Christopher, as you all know, was the man responsible for the success of the Netra project, which is the airborne early warning and control system, which is now in operational service. And also he developed a surveillance radar for the Indian Navy, which is mounted on the Kamau helicopter. The recent war, Op Sindoor, has very graphically brought out the vulnerability of airborne early warning control aircraft to long-range surface-to-air missiles. So what are your thoughts on the future of airborne early warning systems?
Obviously, it will continue to have its dominance. As you know, as of now, CAPS is having virtually about 72,000 crores equivalent projects similar to AVAX. If not all of them are AVAX, but the different kind of them. Even as you know that in 2019, that Abhinandan's success at that particular point of time was due to the Netra at the back telling the information and coordinates of both himself as well as the opponent. And likewise, this is bound to be there for quite some time. Of course, a debate is there whether should it be a manned or unmanned. It's always going to be a debate. But even in US, ultimately, they have taken a call to say that it is going to be there for some more years to go. So the production what we are planning or the models new versions called Mark II as well as Mark 1A certainly is going to stay for quite some time, at least for 30 to 40 years to go.
All right. Do you ever see the task of surveillance being carried out by low Earth orbit, a constellation of low Earth orbit satellites, as some people are predicting?
Yes, both will be there. I'm sure the times to come, a network of satellites is bound to take over part of this load. Still, I don't know whether we will be able to have continuously monitoring or specifically monitoring a sector like what AVAX can do. Will be totally be replaced, but there is a chance over the decades it may change to a fully LOS LEO satellites monitoring.
Yeah. Now, talking about technology, for your active electronically scanned array radars, now we are switching to gallium nitride chips. And how are we placed there?
Gallium nitride is the technology for the final amplifier. In fact, we are going the other side, even to the silicon, because of the cost and controls, and the digital can be brought in. There is something called core chip, which will do the process of digital side as well as giving the phase shift and attenuation or whatever is required. The power amplifier go to the gallium nitride. So what I'm trying to tell is that gallium nitride is going to take over the RF side, yes, because of the efficiency. But however, much more technologies are coming in the lower side because the 5G is totally with the silicon substrate. So that is what is going to dominate as a total TR module, even in the radar side.
Okay. During your time as the head of DRDO, you had focused a lot on the main battle tank and the armored fighting vehicles. So where are we in that area of land systems.
One such a thing is attacks, what including Dr. KGN brought out, attacks as combined in the sense technology from our lab and at the same time two industries we had right from the beginning. One is the Baba Kalani's the company, other one is Tata's. In spite of that, there is always a pressure, but we have given a example. But I wrote letter to the defense secretary, followed by the minister, none other than our honorable minister Nirmala Sitharaman, stating saying that the attacks is at least 20% more higher requirement than the tax, and the tax was 1583 numbers were required, whereas we have been asked to make not more than 10. So we, in spite of the two companies supporting and pushing it, we had a lots of problem. Ultimately, some few hundreds have now cleared. But I was having a hope, though that 1580 was stopped, I was having a hope totally it will be stopped and only our attacks will go. And Dr. Kamath reminded me that they are now putting another requirement saying that it has to be lightweight. I think this is about 18 tons, and they are still putting another hurdle saying that it has to be lightweight. Thereby, again, it may not see the number. But however, having done this heavy weight or higher weight attacks, it is very much possible for them to do the lighter one also.
Okay. Now I'll move to Dr. Kamath, who is the current head of DRDO. Looking at the recent wars which have gone on since 2020, drones, missiles, standoff weapons have sort of dominated the spectrum of conflict as it has taken place. So where does India stand in these three areas?
So let me start with missiles. I think today we are capable of making any type of missiles for any ranges. So I would say that our missile technology is state of the art. Maybe we are slightly one rung lower than the US capability or the Chinese capability. But I would say we are very self-sufficient and Atmanirbhar in the missile technology. The drone technology has really dramatically changed over the last few years. We have been working on drones for a long time. Our lab AD in Bangalore has been working on drones as well as larger UAVs. But today, I would say we are not the leaders in the drone technology, but we have very good integration capabilities. Some of the subsystems, we are still dependent on foreign sources. Today, the batteries, the motors still come from abroad. We have to invest heavily in these subsystems because the numbers required for drones is really very large. And today, though there are several companies which do make drones or which do integrate drones, we don't have the capacity to make the number of drones that will be required in the wars going ahead.
Drones have this peculiar problem of quantity. The newspapers say that Ukraine is making 2 million drones and Russia is making 2 million drones a year. So obviously no Indian company can make that number because maybe the army will, the services will buy the first year's output. Then after that, they have to either export or make some other product. So is DRDO looking at the private sector to look at FMCG companies, the automobile sector, and all, to prime them to produce drones in large quantities?
See, one advantage of drones is that it's required in several applications for logistics, for agriculture. So we have to make sure that it's an integrated approach we take when it comes to drones. I don't think only supplying to the military is going to help them in sustain themselves. There are certain differences in military drones. The one thing which military drones require is that they have to be hardened against jamming, against spoofing, which the commercial drones don't have to worry about. But, and of course, weaponization. Military drones look at weaponization. But unless the drone manufacturers address the civilian sector too, it will be difficult for them to sustain.
One of the big holes in our defense self-reliance efforts has been our inability to make our own jet engine for fighter aircraft. So where are we today in that quest?
So, as you are aware, we started the Kaveri engine program in the late 80s. We achieved a thrust of 71 kilonewton, but that was not sufficient for our LCA's needs. So we have now converted the Kaveri engine to a Kaveri dry engine, where without the afterburner, we are now able to get a thrust of 49 kilonewton, which is currently undergoing high altitude trials in Russia. It's also then going to go through a flying testbed evaluation in Russia. And then this engine is going to be used for our unmanned combat aerial vehicle that we are planning to launch soon. But this Kaveri technology is a fourth generation technology. So that is, the thrust to weight ratio is of the order of 6 to 6.5. We have to now look at a higher thrust to weight class engine, which is around 9.5 to 10. And this we are planning to take up as a co-development with a foreign OEM. So we are targeting a thrust of 120 kilonewtons, and we hope to launch this program soon, provided, of course, the government gives us sanction for this. As you know, engine development is a very costly affair, but it's a very critical technology if we have to sustain our fighter aircraft programs. Because you are aware, the LCA Mark 1A is now getting delayed because of the supplies from GE for the 404 engine being delayed. So if we need strategic autonomy in our aircraft platforms, we have to have this critical technology of aero engines and the contemporary technology. Today, if we do it on our own, we are confident that we'll be able to achieve it, but the time taken will be longer. So we are planning to do it in collaboration with a foreign OEM where the entire IP will rest in India. And we hope that once this IP is with us, we'll be able to translate that into not only military aero engines, but also commercial aero engines.
The F-35 aircraft was demonstrated at Aero India 2023.
It's still there in Thiruvananthapuram.
Yes. And also at Aero India 2025. And so I was just going through the literature on that aircraft, and I found that the Pratt & Whitney F135 engine, which is used there, has an afterburner thrust of 43,000 pounds. And they're working on turbine inlet temperatures of 1900 degrees centigrade, whereas I don't think we have been able to cross 1600. So there is this 300 degrees centigrade gap in turbine inlet temperatures. So do we have those high temperature alloys available to us?
The technology for the high temperature alloys do exist. We also have developed the single crystal technology. But today we don't have the production because there's no demand. So the technology exists. Provided this engine program is sanctioned, we can take up alloy development at industrial scale. But I don't see a problem with the technology.
Okay, that's very heartening. Now I'll switch gears to Mr. Anand Krishnan, who is a very seasoned journalist who's been working almost precisely during the period covered by Dr. KG, that is the early 90s to 2020 till now. He's been a defense journalist. So could you tell me, could you tell me what is the role that the media has played in publicizing the achievements of DRDO and indigenous developments in general? I find that the Indian media has always been terribly critical of the efforts of DRDO. So, what are your views on that?
Right. So, sitting next to Dr. Kamath, DRDO chairman, and not asking questions, that's one first time kind of phenomenon I've faced. And when he spotted me down, he said he has got very strong views. So now I am supposed to answer. Very interesting thing, quite often media bashing has become a fashion, especially these days, and we get hit from very close ranges all over. But fair enough. But to precisely answer his question, keeping in DRDO in picture, when I started as a 19-year-old, with all these people around, I still remember Dr. KG and first telling, Anand, looks like, you need to read a lot. Please go and buy Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And then, from there on, a lot of stories with Air Marshal Raj Kumar. Those days, you could just ride on your scooter and go and meet an Air Marshal. Not anymore, a lot of restrictions. Media played a big role in, I'm a journalist, so I wouldn't want to sit here and criticize the media. The problem was with the system. Let me hit the nail, because we did not have access to information in many cases, because of which a lot of things what we reported perhaps did not come to the standard, or there were facts missing in many of the stories. DRDO definitely has been at the receiving end from Indian media. DRDO was, I would say, butchered in many sense by media because they did not know what was happening. And all this changed the moment LCA started flying. So I would wanted to put the pre-LCA day, how media reported about DRDO, and post-LCA days, how media reported. So that's a huge shift, because after LCA flew, after we had access to people like all of you, after the interaction started becoming better, after the armed forces started showing confidence in you guys, the DRDO, the technologies, then there was the need for better visibility. So I think that's very significant when you put Indian media and how it reported India's defense, especially with regard to DRDO, before LCA, after LCA, because till then it was only the missiles. Prithvi flew, Prithvi happened, the Kalam's missile programs, 5 missiles, all that, nothing much to report. But after this, technologies, labs, a lot of people in Bangalore, DRDO labs, we weren't aware of. But then once Tejas started flying, technologies started proving, yes, we came to know about different labs, different technologies. So that is what's, but media will continue to be critical, because if you don't have access to information, how will you report?
We were all seeing yesterday, our Honorable Prime Minister had a long conversation, an 18-minute conversation with the Shooks, who is orbiting the Earth. And the whole way in which the Axiom 4 mission has been covered by the US media, and of course, our Indian media has gone berserk. I mean, all the TV channels show only about Shooks and what he is doing. So, can the coverage of other achievements of DRDO in indigenous achievements be covered in a similar fashion by Indian media, both the print and electronic?
Like the way Axiom covered, or you mean to say?
In the future,
Yeah, definitely.
Could we adapt that model?
Yeah, after this discussion, I think we must sit. Yeah, they have a fantastic bar here, BIC, and Dr. Kamath and I will sit and plan. The issue is, look at the way Axiom or NASA put out, I think we discussed about it. There was, if you take a house from a nursery kid to an 80-year-old man, the press releases, the media kit, if you go to the NASA site, if you follow them on social media, or if you register as a journalist to get extra feed, you have humans interest stories, you have graphics, you've got small videos, you have Pakka press kit available, you have additional information, and still you have option to write to them and get information. That is why these, for example, this particular mission got so much of attention because information is available. So when you have information available, you can do wonders. So they also cater to different segments: television, the print, social media, and even radio, and also for the podcast groups. If DRDO, after Dr. Kamath came, yes, Access, we almost communicate on a weekly basis. There is a response that comes from a DRDO chief. Okay, so if the leadership, I always focused on thing in some of my social media posts that response is the key. You can blame the media, but how if we have enough meat to report, if the leaders are responsive, if the read like the way armed forces repose faith in the DRDO systems, DRDO and the leaders also should repose faith in the Indian media, because we are not Pakistanis. We have supported our, our programs threadbare. So I think it is the trust factor that is missing. As I told you, Air Marshal Rajkumar, I drove to your, when I was in Times of India, to your office to do a story on your watch. He has got a watch gifted by the late Saddam Hussein. Yeah, I wrote that story. And when during, the Sargodha bombing, something was there. Yes, great stories. Can you imagine a journalist even going anybody near an airbase now? No, you can't. So times have changed, trust deficit, but there are hopes like this, the communicative leaders of India's aerospace and defense.
I would just like to add here that in DRDO, 30 to 40% of our programs are classified. So we cannot give access about those programs to the media. That's a limitation we have, unlike the space programs for civilian application. So the kind of thing what was reported for this Axiom launch cannot be done in a lot of the DRDO programs.
Yeah, that's understood. KG, given your long tenure in DRDO, can you tell us about the young people who are joining DRDO? What is the human capital like? And how are they being groomed for project leadership at some point in their careers? What is the process?
Tricky question, because I joined DRDO in 1965, just before the 65 war. So there was some kind of a Josh right then, we are working into a kind of a defense which is important and so on. But there was no grooming for leadership in the laboratory environment in which I worked for about 10 years. I actually walked into a slot where even the project leader, who was probably about 10 years older than me, he had gone away to US for some higher studies or something. So my director called me and said, KG, will you take over this site? And I said, yes. And I became a leader of that little project. So through the course, I did attend some of the management courses and things of that nature. I do not remember anything which is specifically grooming the leaders. Maybe there is some problem about, not being, but I feel, if there's a good question, I feel that at every level, we do need to spot people and form, more or less, put them into a bracket to train them specifically to get to higher positions of management. At the end of the day, I would be very, very happy. I was very happy when I left ADE after a very long tenure of 16 years as director, about which I'm sure many of my colleagues would have been very uncomfortable. The old man's not moving. But when I left, and I felt that there are actually 3 or 4 people amongst whom the organization can pick one. You need to have that kind of a confidence in every place, and also at the top level. But I think there is the grooming for management, grooming for higher levels is probably something which they need to work on.
It's like to add that we have understood this lacuna that we had in our system, and we have now started identifying leaders, potential leaders at the level of scientist E. And then we are planning to send them for the appropriate training so that they are ready for leadership.
Dr. Kamath, what has been the DRDO's contribution to India's nuclear deterrent?
I think that's one topic I can't discuss openly.
Whatever is in the public domain, can you tell us?
Yeah, so we are part of the ATV program, which is the nuclear submarine development. Then all the delivery platforms, which are basically missiles of various ranges, whether they are land-based or submarine-based, are also our responsibility. Then I think beyond that, I won't be able to talk much.
Okay. Dr. Christopher, once we have this nuclear deterrent in place, we got to have a very good, secure command and control system. Does such a system exist in India? And there is a press report saying that the Pakistanis got their command and control system through the Americans, but I'm sure we have done it on our own. So has DRDO played a role in that?
I don't know. I'm in a secured place or not, because though I'm retired, I'm also not supposed to talk on those. I strongly believe we are secure.
Second, Dr. Christopher, that we have a very strong command and control. And it is fully indigenous.
Oh, that's very reassuring. That I think that's all we want to know, that the nukes are under very good command and control. Yeah. So
Before we go, can we take 2 minutes from Jalan Sundaram? He wants to talk to you about the life sciences interest that he has.
You have a mic next to you.
Thank you, Dr. Narayanan. In the list you produced, missiles was at the top, life sciences was at the bottom. So I started at the top, I moved down, ran to the last. Because before that I was in the army. And whenever in the army, my problem was, what is happening just on the other side? I'm not interested in the thousands or hundreds of kilometers. 100 yards away, 200 yards away, where is he? Kohima was fought across the tennis court. That was my concern. And also what happens when people, Ukraine, everywhere, the people are getting bombed all over, people are trapped. Can I at least search and locate them? They use dogs. Dogs can't go under rubble. So there have been working people on insects and rats. In fact, we took it up quite some time ago, and we had the pleasure that in 2020, everybody of course it can't be done, but it has been pushed during Dr. Kamath's time. And today, INMAS has put a chip in a rat's brain. The achievement there is they have located which are the nodes. Which node will make the rat turn left? Which node will make the turn right? They put this under loop and they demonstrated. But I'm ultimately not for that, because if you operate on the brain, the life of the rat reduces. There are other modes, I won't go into fully. The one in optogenetics, which makes the brain cells responsive to light cells, like laser cells. That is being done. The second one is a difficult one, but which is what I'm trying now. Train them like dogs. Train rats like dogs. They're as intelligent as dogs. And it is being done. I'll give you only one example. I've been after it now from Dr. Kalam's days, 2014. He would say, Sundaram, your funny ideas are not stopping, but I'm sure you'll find somebody somewhere to do this job. And today, we have a professor from Glasgow, University of Strathclyde. Her name is Donna Keane. And before that, we had a Belgian who was working in Tanzania to locate mines and explosives using rats. We are from Bangalore. We have got Bangalore bandicoots. What they were using was African pouch rats who look somewhat like our Bangalore bandicoots. And with that, they are locating mines left, right, and center. Dogs used to win the competition. 2 years ago, the first time, a 6-year-old rat won that competition, run by a competition. So I am looking at rats. And this professor is working in Tanzania. She's training rats with an Belgian organization in the university for locating survivors in rubble. She's succeeding, and everything needs money. Who is giving the money? It's coming from Turkey. Glasgow, Tanzania, Turkey. It's a triangle. So we are glad that DRDO also is supporting, and this success is in mass, which shows India can do it. It has come. They've got a video of that there. They have got a company, the contacts now in Tanzania. And I appealed to him, Chandy, can you use your Tanzania contacts? So just about 2 weeks ago when they had their foundation day, and 2 days ago, one of the companies who work with him, his name is Murtuzi. I mean, I can't pronounce the African name correctly. He has sent just an email, tell India and all, we would like to do our best. It was, after 1 year of struggle, and he has said, no, how we go further, we have to see. I said, I told Chandy, we'll meet end of this week. We'll discuss, because I don't know what to talk quietly. What do I ask? What do we have? But this is, Dr. Kalam would have said, you are a funny guys to the nth order. But if it works, I think it will help our people, whether in Ukraine or Gaza or wherever have you, any earthquake we are having, whether it's in Kedarnath, whether it's in the water, it will help. So that's what I'm doing. And Dr. Kamath knows about it. It is due to his support that INMAS has worked on it. And the company which is doing it is in RCI. The Prime Minister has blessed it. He said open a lab for cyborgs. And that is 60 kilometers away from RCI. So we are on the move. Where we will do that, sometime it will work out. We have to have patience. Of course, my wife gets frustrated. For 20 years, he was saying Prithvi, Prithvi, Prithvi. Then you say drones, drones, drones. Now you are saying cyborgs, cyborgs, cyborgs. As long as I'm 90 now, well, as long as I am, I will keep troubling people on this score. God bless DRDO. People don't know what all has been done. I've had the problem, which they also mentioned, of not talking to press. I refused to talk to press when I took over from Dr. Kalam. I said, that's the end of it. They rang up in the morning. We heard that Dr. Kalam has submitted plans for Agni. Is it? Dr. Kalam told you. Go and ask Dr. Kalam. I didn't say anything. No, I'm telling both the chiefs. 1 month later, I got a call from Dr. Kalam. Kalam, you are putting me in trouble. You're not talking to the press. I said, sorry, Dr. Kalam. I'm following your orders. I don't talk to the press. You want me to be court-martialed? No, then I'm having trouble. It's up to your problem. If you can't talk, put a spokesman for DRDO and see what is to be done. Really, this thing won't speak. I will not speak. I do not want something to go. As both of them have told you, we cannot speak. We are in that position. Please, Ananthakrishnan, I hope you understand this. We have some limitations, unless you want to see us in jail, like that Gowadia is there now. Thank you very much, KG, for giving me this opportunity. I think what we have to do is give realistic times for funds and this thing. If you do that, it will work. We cannot tell exactly what is happening. You know that problem.
Good morning. Thank you for your time. I'm a very average person, nothing to do with defense or anything close to that field. So as an average Indian, I would say we are extremely proud, irrespective of what is said in the media, of DRDO and all the achievements of our defense sector.
Your question, please.
Yeah, so I have two things. One is an idea just based on what the Commodore said is, and then one is a question to Dr. Kamath. The idea is very simple, is if the AWACS are at risk because of long-range weapons, can we put the sensors up front and put the command and control, airborne command control behind? And when I talk about the sensors, is emitters with low RCS. So that is for whatever you can take and do with it, whatever you feel like. My question is very simple, sir. average Indian like me understands that our weakest place right now is with the aerospace sector, with our fighter jets, and the engines are the biggest issue. What has repeatedly come forth is the test beds that we require. We go to Russia for our test beds right now. And we've seen with the presentation that our R&D allocation has been coming down. What would it take for our political class, for the IAS officers and everybody to increase allocation for defense research and spending? Give us just the basic test beds that we require so that we don't have to be dependent on a third country and the timelines for our projects can be reduced.
Dr. Kamath?
So let me address that. So our defense minister has promised us that over the next 5 years, the defense allocation for R&D will increase from currently 5% to 10%. And since our budget is also increasing, the defense budget, I think we will have a substantial money available for defense R&D. So that part is going to be taken care of. In the new program that we have proposed for aero engine development, we have said that without these test beds, high altitude test beds, flying test beds, testing facilities for individual, whether it's the fan or the compressor, the program should not be sanctioned. So if the program is sanctioned, it should be sanctioned along with the infrastructure and testing facilities which will be required to develop it within a reasonable time frame.
I have been a critic of DRDO for the last 10 years, and primarily the points I have are technology development and product development should be separated. Technology development should precede product development. Second is the user involvement is very important. From what I know, Navy has been foremost in involvement in development of new products, and in fact, it has its own ship design department. Third, industry should, as far as possible, within the confines of money, should develop products based on technology advances and also what is happening in the rest of the world. As long as funds go to the DRDO and not to industry, industry's ability to develop new products will be limited. Finally, we need to have an ecosystem of different tiers of industry. I remember before I joined Bharat Electronics, when it began manufacturing a artillery radar, even plastic bakelite buttons had to be manufactured in Bharat Electronics. We do not have sufficient tiered suppliers, sub-suppliers for the major industries. And finally, now that private sector is going to play a big role in defense industry, defense finance has to learn how to manage the cost plus fixed cost and variety of mechanisms to fund the development and manufacture. These are the points I want to make, and thank you very much.
Thank you. What is the panel's opinion on maneuverable long-range missile systems beyond 20,000 kilometers using cryogenic fuel or fission-based fuel?
Dr. Kamath?
So
we are now focusing on hypersonic missile technology. We are not yet looking at fission-based fuel. Cryogenic is okay for the rocket systems, but we are now looking at more of cruise missiles which can fly low. The cryogenic systems may not be suitable.
Sir, much has been said about civil military fusion, and all the success of China is being attributed to that. So recently, we are doing a study on this, how it goes about. In fact, in the USA, civil military fusion was there for a very long time, and it is successful. One simple example I want to quote. The use of artificial intelligence for strategic planning or for military use or for anything else, China has been investing a lot of money and practically using it in things like traffic management, etc. Today, Bangalore is very famous for its Japanese artificial intelligence based traffic system and the traffic management system. Even for this, the civil are not offering, the civil industry. Okay, so how are we going to achieve great things with this fusion of giving projects to the private industry when they can't even do a traffic management system? We are using the Japanese system, and if all of you know, if you cross the signals in Bangalore, there is a symbol called MNL. You know what it means? Manual. There is one police constable operating it all the time. No, I'm just making it as a sort of
Observation. Okay, thank you. Thank you,
So,
PMS.
I would
Sanjay?
like to just respond here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
The problem we have today is overall, if you see, we spend only 0.65% of our GDP on R&D. And that also mostly the R&D funding is from the government. We need to have private sector also invest a lot more in R&D. If you look at countries such as Korea, they invest 4% of their GDP on R&D. And even large countries such as US spend more than 2.5% of their GDP on R&D. So I think there has to be an increase in spending on R&D from Indian companies if we really have to move to the next level.
On behalf of BIC, I'd like to first of all thank Dr. KG Narayanan for the book, for bringing the book to BIC, and for putting together the panel. I want to thank the panelists, Dr. Kamath, Dr. Christopher, and Anand Krishnan on stage. It's not difficult to engage a conversation like this, but kudos to retired Air Marshal Rajkumar, because he managed to ask, I think, overall about 18 questions in about 40 minutes. So thank you so much for that, sir. I think we covered a wide ambit for the audience today. And thank you all and have a wonderful day ahead. Thanks.